I mean, South Africa, we're free, but like half the population is poor, dead poor. You know what I mean? They're free from oppression. But being free from oppression, my friend, is not freedom. Freedom is being able to enjoy life. And to enjoy life, you need money, peace, security, recreation, entertainment, education, and comfort. You know? And until African leaders can get into that kind of thought, we'll always be in the miserable condition we are in. And most of our leaders will always be for sale. But it's usually a great deal of the population within the elite, you know, who they get corrupted, you know, and they get consumed by overseas partners, and they think going to London or Paris or Brussels, you know, New York is a big thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special feature of Power Plays and Paydays here on EBnet.Stream. I'm very excited to be joined today by Wayne Duvenage, the CEO of OUTA. Wayne, I'm sure, is known to most of you, as he's been quite prominent in many circles in South Africa and within the press as well. But let me give you a quick introduction of who we're speaking to in case you don't know him. And Wayne, apologies if I embarrass you in any way. I do not intend to do so, neither by disclosing your age or your accolades. So Wayne is a prominent civil activist in South Africa and an entrepreneur, and has been a business leader in corporate South Africa in the past. His specific focus on combating corruption and promoting accountable governance, and we're going to be talking about that today in this interview. Born back in 1960 in what was then Southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. Did his Bachelor of Science degree at the University of Natal, and became successful in the travel and tourism industry, ultimately a CEO of Avis Rent-A-Car. And that, I think, was from about 2007 to 2012. Then he made a huge decision to move out of corporate space and focus on a passion for social justice. So he left the corporate world and co-founded the organization Undoing Tax Abuse, which is OUTA, and initially as its chairperson, and since 2016 as its CEO. And I'm going to leave it at that point because I would like Wayne to please explain to us, what does OUTA do, what is OUTA's intent and purpose, and we'd also like to talk a little bit about the successes of where you guys have actually added value in the lives of us citizens of South Africa. So Wayne, thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you for all that you have been doing in the community of South Africa, and over to you if you could explain what OUTA is.
Yeah, thank you, Leon. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I'm going to keep it short because it can get it's quite long. But when I was in the car rental industry and chairing the industry body, Savral, at the time, about 2010-11, we saw these gantries going up in Gauteng on the freeway networks, and we were really concerned that we knew nothing about it, and we learned that the public knew nothing about it. And Sanron had sprung the surprise on us, having upgraded our congested freeways, which is government's role. You've got to keep upgrading infrastructure to keep pace with the economy and the developments that are required. And lo and behold, we hear of this new electronic technology, and it's just really thrown on us. Now, we were never opposed to the user pays principle or the use of technology. What we found as an industry, where we just dug a little bit below the surface, was a scheme that was going to fail. And you don't want to live in a country where systems are partially implemented, and the taxi industry and half the people get away with it, but the other half will have to just pay. And we have a lot of that in this country. So if it isn't going to fulfill its purpose, and there are cheaper ways of financing, by the way, because this is also where it went into road financing. There are better and easier ways to do this, far cheaper than what they were trying to do. Then those or the question we have for government is, why didn't you choose those options? Anyway, after a year and a half of digging and trying to engage with government and convince them that this was really a bad idea. And it had all the hallmarks, by the way, of corruption. That was, by the way, the intended mechanism of getting money offshore into international companies. So we had a choice. We could either challenge government or not, just look away and let another failed system implement itself and collapse. And I managed to convince the industry, and that's all the car rental players, the fleet owners, that it would be remiss of business not to challenge this. Well, we did, and we successfully interdicted. Then it became complex. We were lucky to get that interdict, by the way, but nonetheless, we had to go the legal route before we went the civil disobedience route. And it's very rare that business, by the way, challenges government on policy like this to this extent. Lo and behold, they came down heavy on all the big business players. So you got the Bidvests and the Imperial Groups and the Unitrances and the Barloworld that owned all these fleet companies. And I call them the Politburo, the big boys that's linked to the ANC that sit on these boards, put these businesses under pressure to capitulate, stop funding this initiative. And that was sad to see.
Did that succeed?
Yeah, sorry?
Did it succeed?
Well, yeah, they stopped funding. I got mails overnight, within 2 weeks from every company. Sorry, we have to pull out of this. Sorry, our board has told us to do this and that. It was very, very frustrating. And that, I understand businesses' view sometimes in these, but there is a time when you have to stand your ground as business, and they capitulated. They were bullied. And coerced by government, and the threats were, I saw the mails that, your business, your companies will be taken off government's procurement lists and so forth. It was shocking, the bullying tactics that were implemented by the ANC government. And I believed that this fight had to be taken into the people's space. It became the people's fight. At the time, I'd had a good 5 years in my role. I'd achieved a lot of what I'd set out to achieve at Avis, and there was no animosity from my bosses, from the Barloworld board or anything. It was a personal decision that I sat down with my bosses and said, look, there's something that has to happen here. I don't know how long it's going to take. I really thought at that time sanity would prevail within a couple of years, a year or two max, and that I could re-enter the corporate world in another form. But for now, this fight needed full-time attention, and it needed massive communication strategies, and a plan needed to be put together. And so I, with an agreed exit strategy, left the corporate world and said, let's go and see where this goes. Lo and behold, not 1 or 2 years later, here we are, 12 years later. And timing is everything. It's all about being in the right place at the right time. So many things gave rise to OUTA becoming what it became. And in 2016, after lengthy and massive amounts spent on court battles on this one issue, and we were starting to win, because this had to be taken into and again, a big challenge, getting middle-class South Africa, this is motorists, to become civilly disobedient to a law was a very, very interesting challenge. And our view is always that bad law has to be dealt with in a civil disobedience campaign, not burning the gantries down, not being destructive, but showing government through collective force and the power of the citizen that when they get it wrong, they have to change. They were very reluctant initially, but in time, we wore them down through very clever strategies of exposing the propaganda from government, exposing the weaknesses in the laws, using the social media, which was growing at the time, engaging meaningfully with the media. So this was a communication strategy and war, and then introducing a lawfare strategy to say we will defend every citizen. And we took a leaf out of the whole Group Areas Act challenge by Gilbert Marcus, who told us, when you win the first case, you go case by case. When you win the first case, it becomes precedent and the thing collapses. And that's how they collapsed the Group Areas Act, the past laws.
Just to come in there, so in the context of funders pulling out off the back of threats, did you guys receive threats directly as well? And how did you fund it then with those guys pulling out?
Yeah, firstly, I mean, we learned a lot about the law and lawyers. The lawyers told us this case would cost us about R1 million. We went, just in case we needed more, we went and raised 2 million from the industry, the players, the big players. Not a lot of money. Lo and behold, we hadn't even got through the interdict in the beginning, and the court case costs had come to 3.5 million. And we can see the strategy of the legal fraternity. That's a book for another day, but nonetheless. So now this bill is mounting, and business pulls out, and we tell the lawyers, look, we'll find a way to get the money from the public at some stage. Then they did threaten us. They said we're not going to be able to go and interdict or appeal the bad judgment we got on the one review. And we went to the public. And we called a press conference and said, look, this is your fight. This is why this ETOL matter has to be fought. If we don't get the money to pay for the appeal that has to happen, by the way, we owed the lawyers 3 million, and this was another million. They said, get the million for the appeal for now. We'll deal with the 3 million outstanding. And we need it quickly. They said we need it in a week because we have to file papers, and you only got a certain windows to appeal. And we just called a press conference. I mean, I was advised by our guys, look, just throw in the towel and capitulate, Wayne. And I just said, if we do that, government becomes the beneficiary of a very deceitful, wrong campaign. So if it's the people's fight, we have to go to the public. Called a press conference, and long story short, but literally we're saying, look, this is your fight. We need R1 million. We need it in a week. There's the bank account. And we said the media help, just get this message out there. Well, they did, and lo and behold, we got 3.5 million. So we were able to settle a lot of the debt, go to the appeal, and the appeal process was great because it reversed a bad costs order by the previous judge, and it opened the door for this what we call a collateral challenge, a defensive challenge, where we could defend individuals if they were summoned, because that was government's last resort, is to start summoning people who didn't pay their tolls. And it was failing by then. We'd collapsed it just through our communication strategy. So yeah, business left. We now became relevant to the public, and then we got the funding model right. We knew that, and then the public, by the way, started asking us, why just e-tolls? And Kandla was headline news, SAA, Dudumyeni, Zuma was, state capture was really getting into full gear at the time. And we had a good, long strategic session and said, okay, we can go down this road, but we didn't want to become just another NGO that highlighted and exposed things and stops there. Because the media does a good job of that. And we wanted to start holding people to account. And what that meant was that we had to build legal capacity because we wanted to build our own court cases. We didn't want to rely on lawyers. It was extremely expensive and it's slow. So we're going to employ our own legal team, advocates and some legal specialists. And we're going to employ project managers, investigators, and we're going to work with whistleblowers and get information around corruption and start holding people to account by not only exposing it, but now immobilizing through all oversight entities. Why are you not doing anything at COGTA, Auditor General, Public Protector? Use every avenue we can to light the fire on that issue, create the heat strong enough so that change takes place. People are held accountable, and then also lay charges and hand them over to the police. We can't prosecute, but if we put the prosecution process under pressure to prosecute, that might get some traction. And so we were learning and building a strategy and a model as we were going. And we got the funding model right by saying to the public, look, if we're going to do this, we can't do it in a void. We can't do it with volunteers. You have to employ people. You have to pay them market-related salaries. They are specialists. This team is going to, grow. We weren't sure to how big, and it's going to cost between 3 and 4 million rand a month to pay salaries, rent, systems, computers, legal fees, and so forth. And lo and behold, that's what we went out. And when we said to the public, rather than give us a once-off donation, we're not going to give you our bank account, because people were saying, I've donated. Rather than give us 1,000 rand a year or 10,000 rand a year or whatever, give us 100 rand a month. Give us 150 rand a month or 200 rand a month, and do so through a debit order so that we don't have to have a whole creditors just chasing, invoices and that. And we switched that on. At the same time, we were lucky that Sanral became our best salesperson. They were summoning people. We were bringing the fight to Sanral, and the public supported us rather than paid the retail bills. And that's where we got the bulk of our funding. It's dying off there because over time people move on, they can't afford it, they retire. And so we have to find new funding mechanisms. But long story short, that's how we transitioned into away from just in one subject matter, ETOL matter, into 340 projects over the last
Sure.
8 years. Yeah.
I didn't realize there were so many, but before we get to those, just quickly, if people do want to support, I'm assuming they go to your website and there's a mechanism there that they can sign up. Is that correct?
Yeah. At outa.co.za, there's a little join now button. You'll find it in a few places, but it's at the top on the homepage. And if you just click there and have your credit card or your bank details ready, it takes a few minutes. It's quick and easy, and we really appreciate it. The more we can get on board. I always say this as well, Leon, the biggest mistake is made by the person who gives nothing because they thought the 150 Rand won't make a difference. If that was the case, we wouldn't be here today.
Well, yeah, I can tell you we should be paying a lot more than 115 e-tolls if you hadn't took up that
Look,
place.
we have some small businesses and larger businesses giving us anything between 1,000 Rand a month and 20,000, 30,000. There's one that gives us 80,000 Rand a month. And they see the value of our work and they say, we want to fund and pay for a project manager. And we're going to contribute that. And that's great. I mean, those are the outliers.
You can never really count the value of accountability because accountability drives a culture. And if anything, and you look at South Africa, that's probably the biggest challenge we have is the culture is wrong. And therefore there is no accountability, and that opens the doors for corruption and so on. So maybe moving forward from that, then you also, and you say 380 cases, but the prominent ones like the delinquency directorship of Dudu Mjeni, the chairperson of the SAA. Just give us a little bit of insight into that one.
Yeah. So what was happening at the time is that Zuma was appointing all his cronies into these powerful positions to just loot and plunder. And Sean Abrams was in office, heading up the NPA, doing nothing, just allowing this, looking away. So we thought, how can we, as the public, do something? So we bought a civil case, and we said, well, if we can get her declared delinquent, then she can't sit on any boards. That's the law. She at the time was sitting on the Mhlatuzi Water Board, Centlec Board, and so forth. And that would at least enforce the removal of her from SAA, just for a start. It was novel. It's not very well utilized methodology of holding people to account. It's very expensive and it takes time. But we said we've got to do it. We've got to try it. We had enough evidence of her delinquency and her behavior, and we set out. And it cost us 6 million Rand, that case, over 3 years, but eventually we got there. But what it did do, it became a precedent for others. And we've now laid similar charges against Helen Boertes in the city of Joburg, who headed up the Joburg Property Company. And we found a lacuna, a gap in the law where directors on state entities or like the SETAs and that, they fall outside the Companies Act and they fall within the PFM, and you can't have them declared delinquent. So we're challenging that and want the law changed so we can go after all these SETA board members and CEOs who are just plundering and allowing the pillage to take place. So yeah, a very interesting case, and we were very successful there.
EBnet is proud to bring you top quality content from experts across the financial services industry in South Africa and internationally, for free. Your support helps us in doing this. All we ask is that you subscribe to our channels by clicking the subscribe button below. Share this video with others you think will benefit from it, and give us thumbs up if you are enjoying the content. That way, you help us help you. Thank you from the team at EBnet. For more great content, please visit www.ebnet.co.za.
So what is your view then in terms of the culture that has built up in South Africa, not just within the public sector, but the private sector? There's directorships going around left, right, and center, and guys are all snapping them up, sitting on boards. And I'm going to express an opinion that is my opinion solely. from some experience, but there's often guys sitting that don't have experience at board level. They haven't worked in the business or in businesses themselves or built anything particular. But secondly, they don't always fully understand where the line is between being non-executive and executive within the business. So there's a lot of influence and confusion that then comes in, and politics that reigns from that. And who loses? Ultimately, customers and shareholders. That's the reality. So is there enough accountability and enough awareness from directors across South Africa? And take Steinhoff as an example. We talk about accountability in the public sector, what came of Zonda, what's going to come of Matlanga, and all of these kind of things. But nothing's really come of Steinhoff other than the executives that have been held to account.
Yeah. So the two sections are very different. You have the public sector and the private sector. Now, as far as we're concerned, the private sector has shareholders, customers that and government that should be keeping them honest. Whereas in the public sector, the shareholders, you and I, the public, and who's watching what's going on there. And that's where the void is. That's why we play in that space. In the private space, firstly, if you're a listed company, there are very strong rules around governance and directors. And you as a company, as a private entity, must select your directors wisely. And as you say, certainly the big companies, if you're putting on your boards non-exec directors that have got no understanding of what being a director is, then that's crazy. So you should be asking some pertinent questions, looking for experience, looking for qualifications, industry knowledge, and so forth. And that's just almost a no-brainer. And if you're not sure, the Institute of Directors of South Africa, OUTA, have got all the credentials and how to go about this, and select somebody who's got an Institute of Director verification or qualification. That's number one. Number two, if you are a small business and you're looking, very often, it's family members or it's people you bring their expertise on. And then you just got to be sure, define this difference between non-exec. In other words, do not get involved in the business. Just be oversight on accountability for us. Have we done everything properly? Is our governance in place? Question us. And then executive directors, the one or two or three people that sit in the day-to-day operations, but also on the board to keep the board informed. When it comes to government and the public sector, well, you're right in what you're saying. It's just like a bun fight, and the whole cadred deployment process is used in that space as well. So very often you'll find people in political positions, they have to get moved. They've got to find them a job, because this is what the ANC does. They say, well, what's her name has just been moved out, or let's say where there's a whole government that's been lost, like a KZN, the ex-premier needs a role. Okay, we'll put her in as chairperson of the CETA. And why? Well, in the private and the government sector, the public sector, it's very different. You don't have to have qualifications. You can earn a lot of money, whereas many business boards and private sector boards, there's a stipend you get paid for each meeting, and it's not a lot. You don't earn a lot of money in those boards in the private sector. Maybe you do in some, but in government you can get wealthy. A director and the average CETA space gets R1 million a year. And a chairperson who manipulates the system can earn up to 3 million rand a year. The chairperson of Sanrol's board is over 3.5 million rand a year. There's a lot of money. And then what you get is overreach. And the boards now start benefiting in other ways, not just their stipends, which are excessive. They make meetings. So instead of meeting quarterly and having the updates and the annual thing, they meet some boards in these state entities meet weekly. They're 50 meetings a year. Why? They're not in the business, but they concoct these meetings. And the CEOs of these companies allow these meetings to take place and just pay. And they give them other perks and trips and travel. So it's in that public sector space where this gross abuse is taking place, and is where we've been doing a lot of fighting in the CETA boards, the NSFAS boards, Sanrol's board, and so the list goes on. And we're actually compiling a project to try and force legal change. There's no standardization. You'll find a director earning X amount per hour on one board and a totally different value on another board. So we want to standardize this, slow it all down, just get some sanity in and get proper appointments done. Otherwise, we lose billions a year as a result of this.
So, there's so much waste in the system. It must be frightening to just add it all up at the end of the day. Yet we sit with such high joblessness in the country, low growth, and so on. And we all know the story. The political atmosphere is changing, though. The average South African is starting to, I think a little bit more about all of these things and has gotten to the end of the road in terms of all of this. But how do you see things at the moment in terms of, do you see a shift in the average South African and how they look at the political situation? And where else have you experienced, two questions, where else have you experienced also cases of other waste that you've had to target?
Well, I think firstly at the political shift level, the electorate, look, we live in a democracy and the power does reside with the people. And we've seen a shift in the last elections where we now have a shared government. The ANC is now dropping in its control. And thank goodness, because if they still had the majority in this last national elections, you and I would be paying another 2% in VAT. But the government of national unity had a fight internally and fought for what was right. Look, the public, and you see it more at local government. It's going to happen now in 10 months' time, local elections. A lot more municipalities are going to go into coalition governments. ANC is going to lose their power in those that have been decimated, and they have been decimated. And it's in local government where you feel the collapse more. It's where you live. It's the potholes you have to go over and the traffic lights are done. That's where the pain is the highest. And it's just so frustrating that we have the biggest city in Africa, this economic hub, Joburg, run so poorly. And it impacts. So we sense there will be a big change there, but again, maybe not. You just don't know what dynamics unfold. The message to the electorate is vote. Anyone who says I didn't vote, I say, well, then you've got no room to complain. And so often, again, it's the same thing. Well, what's my one vote going to count? But I think this is where the politicians need to explain to the public. There's a proportional representative vote for every seat that is won by a ward candidate. There's another seat that goes to the party on proportion. So, for instance, in a DA-led ward that they win 90% or 80% every year, you say, okay, well, the DA is going to win this ward. Well, no, your vote is still needed for the proportional representative seat, because the greater, and I'm not punting the DA, by the way, but the greater that party's percentage overall is, the more they get on the other proportional representative seats, which gives them greater power in running that city. So that's a small thing, which I think this is, electoral education that we need to get out there. The youth are missing in the elections. They are small percentages. It's their future. It's quite frustrating. And we've been calling for voter education, youth education on why and how government works and why it's important to participate in democracy by voting in schools, and especially last year in life orientation lessons. I mean, it's such a powerful message you can give to the youth, but government doesn't want that. Why? Well, government doesn't want the youth and this public of ours educated on their power. That's the real issue. And it just permeates from the top. It's a policy, unwritten policy. It's an ideology that's permeated through the ANC to make sure that they control with as least questioning of their antics as possible. That's changing, though, fortunately, through social media and more good media coverage.
But I think so I agree spot on. Social media is changing it, and there's been an uprising of podcasts and a lot more awareness that's being created off the back of that. But again, conspiracy theorists, no Starlink, because that could allow rural areas to start understanding some of this.
And they won't tell you that that's the reason why, but that's the underlying reason why. Elon Musk's team, for all his good and bad sides of things, they have said in coming into South Africa. They will provide free internet access to about 2.5 million children in rural schools, internet connectivity free for all police stations, border control. I mean, it's such brilliant stuff. We need this connectivity. It just empowers people with information and knowledge. And but they hide behind a BEE thing. And the value of that, which they will enable the youth and more so the poor to become entrepreneurs, to become, successful in life, far outweighs the fact that the 31% is going to be held by somebody. And then we hear, but this person in position of power to make this decision wants their son to be the CEO, and then they will. It's all of that nonsense. This is the flaw, the ultimate flaw of the ANC and its cadre deployment and its BEE strategy. It's absolutely putrid.
Well, I think the time is coming, so the judgment will be there. What are you guys working on at the moment? Anything prominent that you're specifically working on that you can talk about?
Yeah, so we are challenging and taking Eskom on and the municipalities around this embedded generation solar registration and fees and permissions and so forth. We've studied the law behind all of this, and again, it's like he tells, it's such an irrational process. But essentially, what's happened is Eskom has created its own perfect storm. Its prices are through the roof. They're trying to make sure that people who are on prepaid with the solar switch over to postpaid so that they can grab more funds from them on the fixed costs. Now, we're not opposed to understanding of a fixed cost. But what we are opposed to is people being told that they have to go into another tariff structure just because they've mitigated their reliance on Eskom and the high cost of electricity by putting solar. We're saying to them, what are you doing about people who install a gas stove? I mean, you can't go after them. You can't go after, this is this side of the meter, so long as it's safe, and that's what the certificate of compliance does. Everything else has got nothing to do with you. Whether I've got 10 panels on my roof, my neighbor's got one, the different reasons and different permutations. You're out of line, and the municipalities have just got it wrong, and they are just knee-jerk reacting, because not only do they lose the people going off grid, they lose through illegal connections, through ghost tokens on those. They've got such a mess, and that's just because they've badly run these municipalities, and that's why government and Eskom has been badly run for so long. We're in this mess. So we'll fight that. That's the one big project we'll continue. We are in court to reverse a decision by the Minister of Higher Education on one of these SETA appointments. It's really overlooked the regulations there. And we've got about 20 projects on the go at any one time. We're looking at the board remunerations. There's a new project, the whole transport sector, unlawful licensing, vehicle testing centers, a lot of corruption going on in that space. It mainly is whistleblower generated corruption, maladministration, and manipulating procurement systems. So we stopped that driver's license one tender. We're fighting an R2 as well, not because we don't believe in the point demerit system. It's just like he tells. Government has this view that if we legislate something, it'll work. But if you don't have the systems and the processes in place, they collapse, and they just can't see this. And we have to keep fighting with government to listen. It's so sad. I mean, if Barbara Creasy just opened the door and said, come and sit down, OUTA, and a couple of other organizations, sit down and tell us where you see these problems, how can we fix them, can you help us find the solutions so we can fix, road carnage, not have 12 kids die in an accident and everybody runs around and sorry, you're going to fix it, but they don't, and then it happens again and again. We can fix these together, but government has this view that keeps civil society outside, that we don't want them involved. And I'll tell you why. When government knows what's wrong and you tell them, here's the corruption, here's the system that's causing the problem, if they don't fix it, they are remiss and they are implicated in the problem. So they prefer to look away and not know where the corrupt loopholes are, because it suits them and it suits the connected cronies, and very often high up in government, that are working with the syndicates in these broken systems to loot the finances of this country. And it really does come down to all of that, Leon. I must emphasize this. The ANC is a corrupt network of people who are doing as much as they can to plunder, and it's getting worse now because they can see the end is coming, and to enrich themselves and all their connected cronies. It's quite right.
It's like I said earlier, it's a culture. That's the reality. It's a culture. And it's not, I mean, like in every country, you're going to find an element of corruption and criminality. In South Africa, it's become the norm. That's the reality.
It's the ruling party that allows this,
And if one person's doing it, another person's doing it, it's all sort of okay.
And they all learn from each other. Huh? And they've mastered the art of procurement manipulation, let me tell you.
I think also mastered the art of looking the other way and not really having to do anything about it.
Yeah, they don't want to. Yeah.
So Wayne, final question for you. Have you got any regrets making your move from corporate to doing what you're doing now?
No, look, I mean, it was necessary. I didn't never set out and planned to become a civil activist. It was never on my, but it happened, and I'm glad I did it. I think the one regret is there's no shares in a non-profit entity. We're a non-profit, public benefit organization, and there were a good 4 years that I had to live off of savings to get through and get by and then consult a bit while we were building this entity. So it's made it tougher. But having said that, I deal with that in the ways that I've got to deal with. But I don't regret 1 minute what we've done. We've built a 35-person team that is funded by the public and business, small business, large business, some corporates that realize that protecting our democracy against corruption is actually important. So when you have CSI spend and CSI objectives, very often this sort of ambiguous corruption thing is not catered for. So people will spend their money on environmental matters and education and schooling. They've got your CSI spend. And we're trying to get the corporates and business to understand that actually defending this country against corruption is just as important. And so plug OUTA into some of that spend. And not only are you doing the country good, but you also get a tax rebate, an 18A certificate. And we got good relations, by the way, with SARS. We help them test the 18A compliance processes. We also have a great relationship with the Auditor General, with the Public Protector, SIU, Andy Mativi and his team and ours are just fantastic. So when businesses engage and support us, I think they can only see that they're doing good for this country, and I just want to emphasize that. So I don't regret it. This has been an amazing journey. I've learned a lot and learn every day.
Well, I hope you get thanks every now and then, because I mean, at the end of the day, you are representing all of us ordinary citizens in what you do, and we should be very grateful. So I'd say congratulations to you and thank you for the role that you guys do play. We all behind that mentality, that attitude, the role that you are fulfilling. So thank you for that. Is there any way, or is there any need on your side for people to volunteer or support in ways other than funding?
Yeah, it's a different one. Yeah, and before I go on, I must just say OUTA is bigger than me. I've got an amazing team, and without them, we would struggle. So yeah, look, we often get that question, and one thing we've realized in the beginning, we tried to do it on volunteers, which is why we said, no, we've got to get this funding model to get people. Some of these projects take years. You build up the capacity and the skill set, and you have to pay market-related salaries to keep them on board. So the long and short of that is, if you bring in volunteers and you start the work and they're not there, it becomes more problematic. And you've got to manage volunteers, by the way. So it's not like we don't want to be seen to be arrogant enough to say, no, we don't want volunteers. I think from time to time we do bring in some what we call contracted work. Sometimes we get it for free. A person says, look, I'm retired, I've got skills, yeah, I'll do this. But 9 out of 10, you can't even expect that people to do it for free. There's some compensation required. But then it's project specific. And very often we've had that, and then they've got another job, or they're traveling and then they can't do the work, and we need to file our papers by the state. So as a rule, generally, we don't. We can't bring volunteers into the organization. To us, the best way you help us is just by donating. We use those funds to employ the staff that we need.
So I'll be including a link to your website in the description to the video, but then also just very quickly, you wrote a book on the e-toll saga. Is that still for sale?
Sure, it was so long ago, I think 2015. I've seen it here and there. It was at Exclusive Books, most bookstores. I think if you just check with them. I don't know if there's any in circulation, and because it's old, we haven't republished it. I'm thinking of another book that'll incorporate part of that, but the bigger journey that we've been on, that'll come out later. A bit busy at the moment.
Well, when it's out, let me know. I'll be an interested reader. Wayne, thank you so much for joining us on Power Plays and Paydays here on EBnet.Stream. We wish you all the very best going forward, and you have a friend in EBnet. So if you ever want to engage with our audience, please feel free to give us a shout. And we wish you all the very best. And again, thank you for everything that you guys have done.
Lovely. Thanks, Leon. Thanks for the opportunity and taking the time, and to your network out there and your viewers. If you are supported, thank you very much. We can't do without you. If you're not, think about it very quick. And let's move forward, and let's not lose sight of the fact that this country's potential is immense, and we cannot let it go to waste. So it is up to civil society, you and I, to be active citizens, even if it is just through supporting organizations like ourselves, to hold the fort until electoral change eventually does come meaningfully enough to unlock the wealth of this country. So I look forward to the future of South Africa, and we just got to hold the fort. Go well. Thanks again.
What a fantastic ending, Wayne. Thank you so much. All the best. Keep well.
Pleasure. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.